Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome indeed to our WiggyWam Get Your Property Questions Answered webinar. We are into week 13, and as you can probably see, I am finally back home and back in sunny Blighty after what was an extended trip away into India, which I thoroughly enjoyed, had a great time, if it wasn't for the little complications that we experienced along the way. But have to say again, thank you to the health service over in India, who took great care of us whilst we were over there, and also really pleased to actually get back into the UK and get back into the swing of things, because we've got some pretty incredible things planned over the course of the next, well, I suppose 5 or 6 weeks as we head into the Christmas period and into the new year. Really looking forward to shaking up the housing market with our releases, which will remain under wraps for a little bit longer. For those of you who have been asking about it or been wondering or tentatively waiting on the sidelines, as I know some people have, as to wondering what we're actually up to and what we're going to be launching, I'm pretty excited because I believe very firmly in my heart of hearts that it's actually going to cut down on a number of the delays that people experience when they're looking to buy or sell a property. And I also believe it's going to help estate agents to get deals done a lot more quickly, and also conveyancers to also embrace the same, but without having to sort of comply with numerous bits of technology, which seems to be a resistance point, but also to help them earn more money, or to, shall I say, actually earn what they're worth. As a result of working alongside us and working with us. So that's something to keep an eye open for, keep looking out for. A bit of a market update for you as well, just before we kick off with the questions that we've got in this week. And as we're waiting for a couple of people to join us, that the market seems to be taking a bit of a turn, and I think it's not unexpected. There's now the pundits seem to be divided into two camps, and the one camp is over here saying, "Don't worry, everything's fine. Everything's going to be carrying on exactly as it is." And some people are saying it's cheaper to buy a house now than it was back in 2007, which I find surprising. I'd like to see the statistics behind that and how the maths works out. And then you've got the other side of the camp, which is the doom and gloom. Oh my God, the sky is falling and we're going to have some tremendous problems in the near future. I tend to sit probably somewhere in the middle, although with a cautious sense of optimism about the future. The market has been too hot. If I speak openly, it has been far too hectic as a result of the stamp duty holiday, or whatever label you want to put on that. And I think the post-COVID volatility has started to dissipate, and we're seeing a fall in registrations of buyers in the marketplace. And that's probably the biggest indicator that things are starting to shift and starting to change. Now, the issue that, shall we say, estate agents and sellers have faced is that there's been a shortage of properties available, and that's caused a swelling number of buyers to pursue a smaller number of properties. And that, of course, has an impact in, if you look at the classic supply and demand graphs, it causes prices to increase. But now, as the result of the tables turning and buyers moving out of the market, there will be more properties becoming available, because stock will come to the market. It won't sell as quickly. It'll be on the market for longer. And as a consequence, those prices will begin to settle, and sellers will be competing against more sellers also trying to sell at the same price bracket or in the same area. That will cause a cap on prices, and prices inevitably will start to fall as people try and entice buyers to run the risk of buying a property, or tempt them into buying a property, should I say, on the basis that their costs are now increasing with the rising cost of getting a mortgage through interest rates and all the rest of it. So it's as I say, I'm quite cautious about how things are going to move forward. I'm seeing, again, some pundits suggesting that the prices will drop 5% over the course of the next year, and 10% over 2 years. I'm also seeing the other end of the scale saying that property prices are due to drop by 40%, and I've even heard some suggest even 50 to 60% price drops. From my side, again, at the risk of sounding like I'm unable to make up my own mind up, I'm actually more cautiously in the middle. And that's for a number of reasons, and it's largely economic that I'm cautious. And the reason why I believe there will be a fall in house prices is because of the one thing that underpins the property market, which is not necessarily interest rates and all the rest of it. It's actually consumer confidence. And that's the big thing that gets overlooked by a lot of pundits in the marketplace, is that they underestimate what it is that drives the marketplace, which is consumer confidence. And if consumers aren't confident in having an income, i.e. having a business that works or having a job that provides them with a stable income, then they're not going to be willing to sign up to a 25-year mortgage or extend themselves by paying over the odds for a property that actually they could probably buy cheaper if they bought around the corner or they waited 6 months. So that's my cautionary tale. I feel I don't want to be talking the market down or be seen to be talking the market down, but I think we have to face facts and we have to be realistic. Prices have risen substantially. I was expecting the market to drop in actually 2019, believe it or not. I was cautious that the prices had risen, and there didn't seem to be the economic factors to back that up. Now we're seeing much wider economic impacts in terms of supply chains breaking down, inflation beginning to run away, people's cost base in terms of petrol and diesel for their cars, utility bills going up, mortgage costs also going up. And the one thing that also needs to be looked at is the amount of consumer debt that's out there right now. People spending on their credit cards or on their hire purchase agreements for cars and all that sort of thing. As that starts to eat away at the availability of cash in their wallet at the end of the month after they paid for their increased fuel bill and after they paid for their increased food bill, that obviously has an impact on the availability of, or should I say, affordability to be able to plug into a new finance product. So I think there is signs on the horizon that the market will take a dip. I don't think that's unexpected. I don't think it will be perhaps calamitous, but I'm always open to there being another credit crunch arrangement that we experienced in 2007, 2008. There are a lot of things boiling away in the background, and we're seeing big companies shedding lots of staff. That's something not to overlook, particularly as they tend to have their finger on the pulse in terms of the, shall we say, the longer tail impacts in the marketplace, the longer term data, and they can sort of model perhaps more accurately what may happen in the future. And if big companies are shedding staff now, it tends to mean either the impact is already there in terms of a lowered revenue, or they're predicting it to happen sometime soon and they're trying to get ahead of the curve. So I think what I'm trying to say, guys and girls out there, at the moment, it's a cautious sense of proceeding with the marketplace. If you're a buyer, as you know, what I'm doing at the moment is sitting on my hands waiting for a better opportunity to buy, which I think will come next year, probably spring, summer next year. I think that's when the impact will be known. But it could happen overnight, as happened in 2007. I remember being an estate agent at that time, and we were in the office, and I think it was December 2007. It was like somebody come in and unplugged the phones in the office because they just stopped overnight. It was when all the news started breaking about the credit crunch, and that's something to be aware of. That banks are generally over leveraged at the moment. I believe their balance sheets are carrying a lot of, shall we say, risky trades or risky debt that they've sort of put themselves in a position and got exposed on. So it could take one major financial calamity like a bank to fall over, and that could start the whole process again and tie up the market. So I'd be cautious personally if I was in your shoes as a buyer. As a seller, there's never been a better time to sell a property than right now. I would suggest if you hadn't sold it in the last 6 months, I would probably take advantage of the tail end of what appears to be the boom in the property market, and I would get your property on the market with a competent estate agent who's going to work like crazy to sell the property, because there are people that desperately need to move and they've got money in the bank and they're keen to get on with it. So now might be a better time rather than sitting on your hands for 6 months or so and see what happens. So that's my cautionary tale. Happy if anybody wants to disagree with me on that, please do comment away. Let me know your thoughts on what data you're seeing in the marketplace as estate agents and conveyancers. The number of transactions that you're dealing with, of course, is always a good indicator as well. So that's a bit of a market update, and let's crack on with today's questions. First question comes in from Damien here. Hi there, Damien. Thanks for the question. So Damien says, I'm a first-time landlord, and hence I need some guidance. I found a tenant and he is asking if it's okay to paint the house and also to change the carpets. He's willing to pay for this from his own pockets. I was anyway planning to steam clean the carpets but not repaint. unsure of any downside of the tenant making these changes. Thanks in advance. All right then, Damien. Well, thanks for the question there, and congratulations on becoming a landlord for the first time. It's quite an interesting experience when you're going out there to build a property portfolio, if that's your plan, and buying a property to rent out. There can be a certain sense of nervousness. And if you're anything like me, Damien, when I bought my first buy-to-let property, I'll never forget driving past it literally once a week at least, just to make sure it was still there. And that seems crazy because the house was built in about 1950. Obviously, it stood there for a good number of years before I bought it. But those are the sorts of things that go through your mind when you're first starting out in this journey. So welcome to the joys of becoming a landlord. To answer your question in terms of the tenant, first of all, I would talk to them about what are their expectations in terms of the length of time they want to be in the property for. And if they are talking short term, as in, we're only going to be here for 6 to 12 months, I would be reluctant to let them decorate the property. If they talk to you about the fact they've got friends and family in the area and they've grown up in the area for a long period of time, I would almost be tempted to give them the opportunity to do the property up to their taste. I'll give you an example. I think it was the second or third property that I bought as a landlord, and we did a kind of viewing open day because at that time there was a number of tenants that were looking for a property, and we had a lovely couple come and have a look at that property called Steve and Zara. They were a super couple. They were just desperate to get their hands on a property in the area because their family literally lived around the corner. Their brother lived, I think it was about 4 or 5 doors away. Their mum and dad lived, a street away round the corner, and they were just a super couple, so polite, so lovely. And what actually happened was I reduced the rent in order to get those tenants into the property because I had a really good feeling about them. I knew that they would be the right sort of tenants, and we were using a letting agent at the time. I should point that out. But I decided I would do the viewings because we were there just finishing off a few bits of work on the property. And yes, Steve and Zara came along. I met them. I just fell in love with them, if that's the right phrase to use. They were wonderful tenants. We actually dropped the rent by 25 quid a month because that's what they said was the ceiling on their affordability, and I had no reason to disbelieve them. And they asked me if it was possible to do the property up, and I said, well, yeah, look, we've done it magnolia and white, which was fairly standard for us at that particular time, and yeah, gave them sort of almost free rein to decorate the property. The only stipulations I would have in this sort of situation, Damien, would be to not use black. Okay, as a paint covering, especially on ceilings. I have seen houses with black ceilings, believe it or not, or purple ceilings, and it's not very attractive. And it takes an awful lot of paint to cover it up if you decide to then redecorate afterwards. So I would certainly say no to black, and I would certainly say that your skirting boards need to remain as white gloss, mainly because they're a lot easier to clean over time. Those would be my stipulations, and I'd also say the ceilings need to be white emulsion. But if people want to put up an accent wall, that's quite familiar. An accent wall is 3 walls in the room are the same color, and then one is either covered with wallpaper or done a different color paint for whatever reason. So I'm happy to let them do that. You also need to be careful that there's certain paints that are what's called textured, and it's almost like they've got sand or grit in the paint, and they put it on, it comes up like a rough finish on the walls. I would certainly not recommend that the tenant uses that because, again, if you then decide that you want a smooth, flat wall, then you need to almost replaster the wall. It's a real devil to get off. In terms of doing the floor coverings and that sort of thing, again, I would say you're happy to let them do that, provided that they employ somebody who's professional to do that. And you might ask them to send you a copy of the quote from a particular carpet fitter in the area who's prepared to come in and do the changing of the carpets for them. Just because you don't want people trying to do a DIY job on laying carpets, and that could be more cost for you when you go in, because if they move out, then you've got to go in and then rip up those carpets and start again. So that's what I'd be tempted to do on that front. And just to wrap up that story with Stephen and Zara, Damien, the point of letting a tenant do the work on the properties because that they will stay with you long term. Now, from memory, I think those guys were with me for 8 years, maybe 9, off the top of my head. And when they came to move out, the reason they had to move was because that were having children. I jokingly said to him, "You've set up a baby factory over there," because every time I spoke to him, there seemed to be another child on the way. But they had, I think it was like 3 children, and they needed to get more space. So they said, "Do you have another property we can move into? Because you're such a good landlord." And at the time, I hadn't, and so reluctantly he said, we've got to move out." And his words to me were, "I feel like I'm stabbing you in the back because you've been such a good landlord." And I said, "Steve, don't you worry about it. Feel free to move on. No animosity from my side. You've been amazing. You've looked after the property. You've done everything I could ever ask for." And then, bless him, he moved out. He found a property to move to, and he moved out. And then I got a panic phone call the following morning from him saying, he was virtually in tears, this guy, bless him. And he said, "The property we've moved into, we didn't see it at the time, but when we viewed it initially, we didn't realize that it had got black mold." And you probably, if you've been keeping an eye on the news, you'll know that this poor kid recently just passed away as a result of, well, it's alleged that he passed away as a result of black mold growth within the property. And as a consequence, he said, "We can't let our children live in this property. Do you mind if we move back in to your property?" And I said, "Look, Steve, I've got no problem with that at all. I trust you. Get on with it if that's what you want to do. I'll ring the agent now. They can meet you down at the property. You can move back in straight away." And he said, "The problem I've got is that I don't have the money now because I paid a month's rent and a month's deposit up front for this other property. I don't have the money to pay you for your rent this month. I don't know what to do." I said, "Look, Steve, move in, get yourself settled. We'll sort it out in due course." And true to his word, he sorted it all out. He paid me the rent that was owing, and then I think it was about 3 or 4 months later, he came across another property. And the point of me sharing that story with you, Damien, is that being a landlord is can have quite a lot of joys to it when you're dealing with nice people and you're helping people establish themselves in a home, and they're getting settled in an area that they like with friends and family. And it's not, I think there's this misconception by a lot of people that landlords tend to be hard nosed and they're only in it for the money and all the rest of it. I really enjoyed having those guys in one of my properties because I virtually never heard from them. They would just get on with it. They looked after it. If there was a problem, we got it sorted. And that was the deal that worked really, really well for both parties. So do what you can to help your tenants, get them settled, get them sorted. And if they're, as I say, they're prepared to spend the money, it may even improve the value of your property, because I have been in some properties in the past where the tenant's actually done a really good job of renovating it. And you walk around, you think, actually, I wouldn't mind living in myself, sort of thing, So they've done a really good job. So hope that helps, Damien. Good luck with it all. And hopefully you'll get on well with your tenants and they'll look after it for you and they'll stay with you long term, because ultimately your biggest enemy as a landlord is void periods. And nobody really talks about this when you're getting into investing, but a void period is very costly to you as a landlord. And just quickly to wrap this point up, the reason why void periods are so costly is because you're not only losing the rental income. So if your rent, say, £600 a month, you're not only losing that, but you're the one having to pay for the mortgage, and that might be 300 quid a month. You're also having to pay for your utility bills whilst the property's empty, and the council tax and all that sort of thing. So all of this adds up. And of course, the biggest issue, depending upon where the property is leaving it vacant for a month or however long it takes you to get a tenant in there exposes the property to the risk of things like theft. And what might you steal from an empty property but the boiler or the copper pipes that run the central heating system? And I have seen properties in the past, Damien, just to give you a quick update on this, where rogues have gone in and they've stripped the boiler, they've stripped the copper piping, they haven't bothered to turn the water off, because why would they? They're in there as criminals, and for whatever they're going to get, a scrap value for a bit of copper, 30, 40 quid maybe, the property's been flooded because the water's been on, and it's caused a right mess. So just be aware of that void periods are your biggest problem. If you can put a tenant in and they're there for 8 to 10 years and there's very nominal increases in rent over that period of time, I would personally prefer that as an investor, rather than being one of these landlords that hikes the prices up every month or every year because they feel that they can, and then run the risk of putting the tenant into an affordability situation, rubbing the tenant up the wrong way, or ultimately having to deal with void periods that cost them all of their profit for the year because they've had the property empty for 1 or 2 months trying to find another tenant. All right. Hope that helps, Damien. Quite a bit of info there for you to digest, but hopefully that will help you with your challenge there with your tenant and you'll get it sorted. All right. Let us know if we can do anything else to help you. Moving on, question number 2 comes in from Beth. Hi there, Beth. Thanks for the question here. So Beth asks, how long should I expect the conveyancing process to take on my property? Our offer was accepted at the end of September. We've had our mortgage offer. We paid the solicitors to start the searches. There's no chain. I was told by my solicitor today that it will take another 12 to 14 weeks from now. Is this normal? He said the property lies with the seller's solicitor. Sorry, he said the problem lies with the seller's solicitor, who is taking forever to respond. This has also been confirmed by the seller, who says they get an answer phone message most days. They try calling and they haven't once responded to their emails. I've never bought a property before, but is this normal behavior of a seller's solicitor? Mine seems okay and is just as frustrated as we are. Is there anything we can do to shorten the timescale? Right. Sorry to hear this, Beth. I see so many questions of a similar ilk come in, Beth, and also online in different forums where people are frustrated as heck with the process, and it's no sympathy, or sorry, it's no solution to your problem here that you're not on your own in all of this, but there is a shortcut to this process, Beth, and the reason I'm going to suggest this is because the issue with you buying this property now is it's not just a monetary issue. It then becomes, shall we say, a sanity or a health issue, because battering your head up against a wall with solicitors who don't answer their emails or don't return phone calls can become excruciatingly painful and drive everybody mad in the process. So if I was in your shoes, Beth, and I wanted to move this deal forward quickly, what I would actually offer to do is to save yourself months of frustration and headaches by offering to part pay or pay 50% of the seller's legal bill if and only if they use a solicitor of your choosing. Okay, now what that means is the seller would change horses as far as their solicitors are concerned and move to another practice, perhaps the same solicitor that you're using at the moment, or maybe, come to us and we'll give you a recommendation of somebody that will fast track this deal through for them. But the point is, the seller is going to be in the same situation and they're going to be frustrated that, they might have paid their solicitor some money on account and then they feel, oh, I'm going to lose this 200 quid or this 300 quid, whatever it is that they've already paid their solicitor if they change horses. Now you're offering to step in and say, look, I'll pay 50% of your legal bill if and only if you'll use the solicitor that I recommend, which is either my solicitor or one that we recommend as WiggyWam, if you want to go down that route. And the point is that by doing that, you're going to fast track this deal through to completion as quickly as possible. And it could be that you get it done within 6 weeks. Now, I'm not going to say you're going to be in before Christmas, because that's, what are we looking at, just over 3 weeks away now. But the point is, you will move it a lot quicker than you ever will in the sort of situation that you're in. And 12 to 14 weeks is a guesstimate. It might be longer. And I'm hearing stories now of some solicitors that only check their email once a week. And the reason they're doing that is because they're either overburdened, or they just don't simply care, or they've got more pressing work on, or there could be other problems going on within the practice that you and I don't need to worry ourselves with, because ultimately where you are, you just want this deal done as quickly as possible and then to get moved on. So offering to stump up 500 to say 700 quid might seem a bit gut wrenching and a bit kind of, oh, I don't really want to do that. And I get it, but the point of doing it is to kind of free up this logjam, and you're doing it on a performance basis, which means you don't pay the money until the deal has actually completed. And it would come out of the completion statement at the end of the deal, where the solicitors will, you'll write it into the deal, this is what I'm prepared to pay, and then the solicitors will do a transaction at the end of the deal where the seller solicitor gets paid out of the funds that you send over when you buy the property. Okay, hope that makes sense. And it will oil the wheels on getting the deal done quickly, and by making it a success fee, you're not liable to paying that money up front. So the seller has the fallback that you'll be covering this cost, even if they have to pay some extra money on account to the new solicitor to get them started on the selling of their property with the new solicitors. Okay, so hope that gives you some guidance, Beth. That's exactly what I would do, because otherwise you could be in a never-ending situation here, waiting and waiting and waiting. And the problem in my experience, I'm not saying this is for all solicitors, but the problem in my experience with these sorts of solicitors is they've generally charged a low price, or they've offered to charge a very low price. They've attracted a lot of work because of the low price, and then they just can't handle the burden of all the extra work that goes on with that conveyance. And I'm going to say something that probably a lot of solicitors will kick back on me over this, but it's largely due to, shall we say, a lack of self-esteem. And there we are, I said it. So I'm expecting the email inbox to go crazy now with people saying you can't say that, but it's largely due to a lack of self-esteem, to being able to charge more for the service that they're offering. Okay, and when they believe in themselves that actually it is worth a seller or a buyer paying £1,000 or £1,200 or £1,500 for their service, that's what's going to help them to have the time, or to be able to dedicate the time to each case file and to get the deal done as quickly as possible for their client, because ultimately it's about service to the client. And there is this mistaken belief, and I see it time and time and time again in the property industry, from some estate agents and from, shall we say, more lawyers than estate agents, that the general public won't pay extra money or a higher figure to receive these services from solicitors and estate agents. And the frustrating part from the client's point of view, and we've seen this thousands of times, if not hundreds of thousands of times, where clients would willingly pay more, okay? But the problem is they don't know what they're receiving for their money, okay? They're being asked to take this blind leap of faith into employing somebody when they don't know what they're going to get for the money. They don't know how long the transaction is going to take. And there's a lack of commitment from the professional employed to explain the process to them in, shall we say, terms that a 5-year-old would understand, but which a seller or a buyer would understand, because they're not in this game every day. They're not buying and selling properties every day. They move house every 7, 14, 21 years, and the whole process is alien to them. They haven't got a clue what a TA6 and a TA10 is. It might be something that, as far as they're concerned, a plumber carries around in their toolbox. They don't know. And that's not to chastise buyers and sellers, but if the client doesn't know what they're getting for their money, why should they be expected to pay more for the service? And the biggest breakdown I'm seeing in agents and solicitors selling their services to their clients is they're not explaining effectively what the client is going to get for their money, and therefore the client doesn't know the difference between a good and a bad service until they're actually living it and they're going through it, and then they vent their frustration on online forums and questions like this that we get through, Beth, where they're saying, this is driving me mad. What do I do about it? I need some help. And I firmly believe that a lot of these problems could be solved, not through necessarily technology, not through necessarily more people, but actually by charging a fair rate, which would allow the solicitor to spend the time and dedicate the time that they need to on the file to get the job done for their client, and so that they can actually make a living from the work that they're doing. So hope that helps, Beth. If you do need recommendations for solicitors that are going to fast track the deal through for you, let me know. More than happy to put you in touch with people who can do this in 6 weeks or so, especially as you're not in a chain. I mean, I have known situations where this is done in 3 days, depending upon whether you've got your mortgage offer. So yeah, I mean, if you've got that in place, it could be done inside of 7 to 14 days comfortably. Okay, but not a lot of solicitors will tell you that. So if you're struggling, come and talk to us again, Beth. I'll be more than happy to point you in the right direction and get that deal over the line ASAP. All right. Good luck. And moving on, question number 3 comes in from Laura here. Hi there, Laura. Thank you for your question here. Here we are. We are a couple of weeks from exchanging contracts when the seller suddenly pulled out. We have been going through this since the beginning of June. The solicitors acting on both sides were very slow and communication was dreadful. I think if they had been more proactive, we'd have exchanged a month or so ago and wouldn't be in this mess. The seller has put the house back on the market at a higher price. They basically said if we agree to that price, they will proceed with the sale. Otherwise, they will wait for another buyer. We can't meet their asking price as it's 15,000 more than we agreed. I honestly don't think they will get what they are expecting, as many properties in the same area have dropped their price. Can they do this to us after spending all this time and money getting to this stage? Okay, there, Laura, thank you for the question. Sorry that you're in that position, and it kind of follows on from the previous question that we were just dealing with there for Beth, that you're kind of caught in this piggy in the middle scenario between two sets of solicitors who, for whatever reason, are not communicating. And I really don't want this webinar to come across as, silos bashing solicitors. That isn't the point here, but it is highlighting to any conveyancers that are watching this that these are the kind of problems that clients are facing in the marketplace. And it is really frustrating when they're the ones stuck in the middle, and all they're trying to do is get their hands on their keys to their new home so they can move in as quickly as possible. And what it sounds like we've got here, Laura, without knowing all the facets of the situation, is that we've got a knee-jerk reaction from a seller who's probably incurred a bunch of costs so far to employ their solicitor and employ their agent to get the property sold. You've come along as the buyer, you've gone along for however many weeks, and then all of a sudden, the buyers incurred all of these costs, and they're potentially facing now increased costs of moving because the mortgage interest rates have gone up and all the rest of it. And as a consequence, they've thought the only way out of this, their knee-jerk reaction, is to jack the price up by 15 grand and then pass that cost on to you or anybody else who's there prepared to pay it as a buyer. I think it's a knee-jerk reaction, and I'm not. If I were in your shoes, Laura, what I'd be doing, I'd be sitting this one out. Quite frankly, well, there's two ways I'd play it. The first part out is I would not be held over a barrel, and being a bit of a stubborn personality, if I can say that, I would certainly not be willing to commit to putting another 15 grand on the table in this situation, particularly as we talked about at the introduction to this webinar, that the market appears to be cooling, there's less buyers looking, and the seller is probably shot himself in the foot and he's going to be sitting with that property on the market for quite some time. Now, the situation from your point of view is that there's more stock coming to the marketplace, so it actually might be a better situation for you to sit this one out and then shop around, and you might be able to get yourself a better deal by finding another one of these properties that's come on the market. Or if you want to play hardball with them, what you might decide to do is to go back and offer 15 grand less than what you were previously offering. Not 15 grand less than what they're now asking, but 15 grand less than what you were previously offering for the property. So if you were offering, say, 200,000 originally, I'd go back and offer 185. And they'll say, well, what the bloody hell are you doing offering this much less? And your response is simply to say, well, you've incurred costs and you're facing a rising cost of acquiring the property because your mortgage interest rate's going up and all the rest of it. And as a consequence, because you've been messed about by the solicitors going through here, then ultimately, you're not willing to pay any more than that. And that will put the seller firmly in your shoes because you're being asked to pay them 15 grand more for nothing. And as a consequence, the likelihood is you may well end up meeting in the middle. You might end up falling out completely. And this is the cataclysmic option, is that you drop your offer by 15 grand and they tell you where to go and you tell them where to go. And it's a cataclysmic explosion. You both fall out and nothing gets done. I quite enjoy that process, but that's just me. If that's what's going to happen because somebody's playing silly buggers by deciding to put the price up by 15 grand, or you come to the agreement of that you just agree the price that was previously agreed and you just get on with it and you choose a different set of solicitors for both sides and you fast track the deal through to completion. And again, I'd be happy to help you with recommendations on that. Now, the reason you want to do this is because you want to do this through the estate agent, because this is the nuclear option. If you decide to go down with the route of a 15 grand lesser offer, the estate agent will help to deliver that in a more, shall we say, empathetic manner to the seller, And if I was the estate agent, I'd be going to the seller and saying, look, they're still interested in buying the property, but because of X, Y, and Z and this, that, and the other, they're actually offering them 15 grand less than what they agreed to previously. And the seller will say, oh, well, that's pointless. Why should we do this? Blah, blah, blah. And then being a good estate agent, what I would say is, well, there's a possibility that I might be able to get them to agree to paying the original price that that we'd agreed, but I could only do that with your say so that we could agree the deal at that price. What do you think? Take it or leave it. And then the seller's faced with the gun to their head of, well, I either accept the offer that I previously accepted, which was acceptable to me at the time because that's what I'd already accepted, okay, or I stick by my guns and I make a fool of myself by putting the price up by 15 grand and sitting it out in a falling market where the likelihood is I might be on the market for 6 or 12 months. And this is the problem that people don't realize because the market has been so crazy over the last couple of years, is that when you go back to when I first started in agency, which was the late 90s, it was not uncommon to have a property on the market for 6 or 12 months with no interest and nobody looking to buy it. And we could return back to that situation. And this is, incomprehensible for a lot of people right now. They can't understand why it would take 6 or 12 months to sell a house. But I've known properties been on the market for 2 years without a buyer. Okay. So that's the situation they face. And they may well then have to sell the property for less in order to sell the property depending upon their situation. So a clever estate agent could use this to their advantage and get the property re-agreed, get it sold, get it through with a different pair of solicitors, so that or potentially reinstate the existing solicitors if there's a commitment that they will get the deal done ASAP and as quickly as possible. So hope that helps, Laura. Anything else that you need, let me know. If you do need some more solicitors, be happy to intervene and get this done with a promise, with a price promise and almost a price guarantee that we'll get it done inside of 6 weeks. So I wish you the best of luck with that. And as I say, anything that we can do to help, let me know. But hopefully the information I provided for you will get you out of this logjam situation and get you moved as soon as possible. All right. Thanks for the question. All right, moving on. Question number 4 comes in from Raj. Hi there, Raj. Thank you for your question here. So Raj asks, we started the build of a new 2-story extension in July and agreed a price and contract with a builder. We paid a deposit up front with the rest being paid at various stages up to completion. Partway through, they stopped work saying there was a shortage of materials because of the war in Ukraine. I then received a spreadsheet and associated invoice with lots of additional things added that were never done or even part of the agreement. The costs were escalating. So after weeks of challenging him, he agreed to remove the dodgy costs off the invoice. Now the builder is refusing to finish the work, leaving us high and dry. The project cost just over 40,000. We have so far paid 28,000. The builder has said it's not economically viable for him to finish the rest of the work for just 12 grand. He said he has revisited the invoices already paid and increased them to reflect numerous costs he had absorbed. Can he do this? Where do we stand legally on this? Can he be forced to finish the work given we had a contract? Okay, Raj, thanks for the question. And there's quite a lot going on there. So let's kind of pull it apart and try and find your way forward with all this. It's always a problem when you're employing a builder and situations like this happen. And the main problem that you're faced with in this sort of situation is that there's a general level of mistrust of builders because we've heard of, a lot of these dodgy builders that take an upfront deposit, for example, as you've paid in your case, and they run off and they say, oh, we're going to go and get all the materials, and they never turn up to do the job, right? So there's an issue that we've unfortunately had a stigma in the industry where dodgy builders don't do the work, or they end up in situations like this where they're trying to increase the cost of the contract in order to cover the fact that they're losing out on the profit margin, or their cost base has actually increased. And this is something similar that happened with a friend of ours who asked me whether or not they should do a loft conversion on their property. This was last year. Should they do a loft conversion or should they move? And I said, have you ever done any work on a property before? And they said, no, we haven't. And it was a modern property. And I said, honestly, if I was in your shoes, I'd sell the property and move up the ladder. I'd leave a loft conversion to anybody else who decided to come in. They decided not to do that. They decided that they wanted to go ahead with the loft conversion. And the problem was that ultimately by doing the loft conversion, they turned it into a 3-story, 4-bedroom property with only one living room, dining room downstairs. And so it became almost top heavy in terms of the space that was available. And as a consequence, these builders started the work on the property. Then there was all this not dissimilar complications, although they didn't blame it on the war in Ukraine. They just said, cost of materials has gone up and this and that. And as a consequence, I think the original quote was something like 45 grand, and they were up to 70 grand at the last time the last time I had a conversation with them. So they had unfortunately been put over a barrel. But in your situation, Raj, I would need to know more about the details of the contract as well as the specification that went with the contract to understand exactly what was agreed and what was not agreed. And if you want to send me that information, I'd be more than happy to go through it in detail and try and understand exactly what's gone on. Because for those of you that don't know, I used to be a project manager working on multi-million-pound development projects and all that sort of thing. And part of the work that we would do is be employed as the employer's agent, if you like. So normally what would happen is with these big development sites is you have the client who owns the land, and they're the ones that go out and get planning permission on it. And then they usually get planning permission for a particular owner occupier. And then the owner occupier would come along, they'd agree a contract price, they'd say, this is how we want the building to be built. We would put the specification together, we put the architect's plans together, the planning permission would be applied for. Once it was granted, we'd then start the build of the project, and that there would be an agreed specification of works that was agreed of what would actually be carried out by the contractor, in your case a builder, but in our case it was a contractor, who would then agree to build the project out to the specification that was agreed. And that specification would go into a great deal of detail in terms of the type of concrete, the strength of the concrete, the bricks and blocks that were to be used, the cladding that was going to be used, the steel framing. And the point is of telling you all of this, Raj, is that the specification detailed what we needed to see built in this particular project. And it was down to the contractor as to whether or not they could source the materials at a lesser cost, or they had different ways of doing the project to speed things up so that they could build in their profit margin. And it was never a case of trying to screw these guys down to the lowest cost base, because that doesn't help anybody, right? We would want them to make a reasonable profit at the end of the job, but it was more important that the project was delivered on time. And the biggest problems I've experienced in doing any of these kind of projects is usually when the quantity surveyor, as it was in our case, underestimates what is required in certain projects. And the worst project I worked on was a development in Derby, which is not a million miles away from where I am right now. And the contractor had missed, or the QS for the contractor had missed, putting in the sum for all of the concrete hard standings outside of this warehouse that we were building. And that came up to a cost of over £100,000 just for the concrete hard standings alone. And they'd completely missed that off the quote for the work. And the guys that we were working with, we would actually question this a couple of times with them. Are you sure this is your price? Are you sure this is your price for the build? They're like, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We can commit to this. And they were a big firm that were employed as contractors. And the problem started literally from day one when we arrived on site, and the site manager said to their QS, where's the allowance for all of this concrete hard standing outside? And it had been completely missed. And so they knew all of a sudden they were 100 grand in the hole in order to try and meet this contract. And again, the point of me telling you all of this, Raj, is that they then spent the next, I think it was the best part of 4 months, trying to find any kind of wriggle room within the contract where they could add in additional extras or bump the price up of the cost of the works so that they could at least claw back some kind of profit from this job. And it ended up that we were on the day of completion, they were saying, yeah, we're going to complete the project. We're going to complete the project. And for, I think it was the best part of 6 weeks, we'd said to them, do you want to extend the date of this contract? because at the moment it looks like you're not going to meet the practical completion date, and therefore you're going to start incurring penalties and this, that, and the other. And they denied it. They said, no, we're definitely on for completion. We're definitely on for completion. And on the day of the practical completion date, we turned up, and the client was the nicest guy you've ever met in your life. A super, super guy, a guy called Paul. I just had the utmost respect for Paul. He was the most amazing guy, and usually very softly spoken, a complete and absolute gentleman. And we sat in this site hut on site, and he listened to what can only be described as bullshit coming from the contractor's mouth as we were sat in this freezing cold site hut, and he's telling us that, even though we've got dumper trucks running around on site, and even though we've got JCBs running around on site, and there's a list as long as my arm of things that haven't been done on the building, that they will achieve practical completion on that date. And I just looked at the client, and the color of my tie was, I could see the blood pressure rising, and it just got to this point, and he turned purple, and he just exploded. And I totally understand why, because he didn't like being lied to. He'd been lied to for 6 weeks as to what was actually going on. The truth had been kept hidden from him, and he knew, because of all his years of experience as a developer, that this actually was never going to hit practical completion date on that time. And so he went into orbit. The contractor backed down immediately, and they then agreed to pay the penalties and extend the contract by, I think we'd agreed like an 8-week extensions of the contract in order to get the building finished and signed off. And that was a bit of a long-winded explanation, Raj, here, but the point of what I wanted to say to you is, you're faced with a bit of an issue, because the likelihood is, having worked on a lot of these domestic jobs as well, the strength of your contract and specification could be widely open to interpretation, because there's you may not have had a specialist like a project manager or building surveyor prepare that contract for you and prepare that specification for you. And as a consequence, it could be wide open to interpretation, which the builder is now looking to exploit. So, as you have got a contract in place, you could be at liberty to force this builder into what's known as the name's just gone completely out of my head, specific performance, that's it. So you could take him to court and sue him and say, you've agreed to this contract, you're not doing the work, this is what we'd agreed, and I'm now going to force you to complete the work to the specification that we've agreed. And that's called specific performance within the contract. And the risk that you have then is that you're going to try and take this guy to court, which is going to involve a lot of cost. And you're also then in a position where he could just refuse to do it and drag it out and drag it out and drag it out, or could simply go to bust. And then you're left clutching a whole bunch of legal bills and not actually getting anywhere with this. So you have to take, in my view, Raj, a very practical approach with this, because the question is it worth going down this legal route and this dispute and falling out, or is it actually worth trying to come to some agreement with the builder, which it sounds like you've tried to do in the past, but actually pointing out to them that if they're in the project for some money, i.e. they've spent out on materials and they've got it up to a certain point, which isn't quite one of the stage payment points, it could well be that they've sunk labor and costs into the build that they're now not going to recover if you don't release the next stage payment. So it might be that you're in a position here of strength where you can say, look, if you don't turn up on site and you're refusing to do any work now, I'm not going to pay you for that, and you can come after me and you can sue me. But I'm willing to work with you on the basis that, you complete this work and this work and this work, and I'll release the stage payment to you. Okay. That might be one way that you can deal with it. It is playing a little bit of hardball, but unfortunately, it sounds like you're being put in a position where you have to take that approach. The second option for you, Raj, would largely depend upon whether or not you are experienced in any kind of project management, or doing this project where you might decide that the work that's remaining to break it up into individual packages of work, such as, I need somebody to do the wiring, I need somebody to do the plastering or the dry lining, I need somebody to do the plumbing, I need somebody to put the windows and doors in. I don't know quite what stage you've got to in this 2-story extension. Have they built just the shell? Have they put the roof on it? Have they done all the put the doors and windows in? Where has it got to? But whatever work is remaining, and from the specification that you've already got, you might decide that you can break it down into individual packages of work, and then as a consequence employ individuals to do that work to bring the project through to completion. Because if you've got 12 grand to go on the work, which it sounds like you have, then you're in a position where it might not, the cost of the project might not overrun, and therefore you're able to get the individual specialists that you need to finish those works off and bring it in under budget or on budget, which would be fantastic. Now, I will say, if you want to go down that road, it's worthwhile going to something like BNI, as a BNI meeting in your local area. Go there and see if you can get a recommendation of some good trades or a good builder who might be able to help you out and take this project off your hands and run it for you, because there are some really good builders out there. I've found a few in my time. In fact, one of the best builders I've employed recently was a guy who was actually training to become an electrical engineer. So not a Sparky, but an electrical engineer. And for whatever reason, there was a complication at the firm he worked for. They let him go. And he said, I'm thinking about branching out on my own. He was doing a bit of painting and decorating for me. And I said, look, go and do it, because I think you're brilliant at what you do. I think you'll be fantastic at what you do. Go and do that work. And there's no shortage for good quality builders who do deliver quality work to their clients. And within, I think it was 12 weeks of starting his own business, he was absolutely overrun with work. And the last time I saw him was about 18 months after he'd started his own business. And he said, I cannot keep up with the amount of work that's out there where people just want to get somebody like me on board and help him out. And he wasn't being boastful. He was just genuinely thankful that he'd been given the nurturing push, if you like, to go and start his own business. And it had worked out really, really well for him. So I think at one point he'd got, what's it called? Wix were actually asking him to go around and fit the kitchens for them. And the amount of money he was being offered to do day rate on fitting kitchens was just obscene. In fact, I wondered whether I was in the right profession, whether I should just down tools and go and get a job working for Wix fitting their kitchens. But yeah, really interesting process to go through if you decide that you go to one of these BNI meetings and gather a bunch of workmen who might be able to help you, or a builder to get things going for you and sort of break up this logjam and move forward. Okay. So hope that helps, Raj. As I say, if you want me to look at the contract and the spec, get it over to me. I'll happily go through that almost line by line, and we can have a conversation to go into that in more detail. Other than that, wishing you the best of luck with it all, and hope you can get somebody to, or a group of people to help you get that project finished as soon as possible, because I know how frustrating it can be when you've got a half-finished job on your hands. All right. So good luck. Moving on, question number 5 here is coming from Maria. Hi there, Maria. Maria says, we are first-time buyers and we found a property we like and about to make an offer. If it's accepted, are we then tied into a contract to buy? Also, who is responsible for hiring the solicitor? Is it ourselves or the estate agent? At what stage does the solicitor need to be appointed? If it is left to us to find a solicitor, where is the best place to find one? Should we look online or go to a local one? Any advice would be appreciated. All right. Well, thank you for the questions there, Maria. One or two that you've got shoehorned in there, but let's just start with a couple of points that I want to make clear at the start. I'm presuming that you're buying here in England and Wales and not Scotland, because the system in Scotland is very different. And if you are buying in Scotland, I would talk to the agents up there and get them to explain the exact process to you, because it is very different to buying in England or Wales. And I'm not going to attempt to explain it to you over the webinar, but go and talk to an agent there, because they'll give it to you in greater detail. I'm also going to assume that you're not buying via auction, and you're also not buying via what's known as the modern method of auction, which is not something I would recommend. I have an aversion to that as a purchasing proposition. I don't think it's stacked in the buyer's favour to be buying that way. Personally, I also don't think it's stacked in the seller's favour either, but those are just my personal biases. So I would, to answer all your questions, when you're buying in England and Wales and you make an offer, that offer is it would be very unusual if it was legally binding. In fact, so you're not tied into any contract to buy the property until such time as you've reached what's known as an exchange of contracts. And that is something that happens after your solicitor and the seller's solicitor has gone through all of the legal paperwork and they've got the searches on the property and you've had the opportunity to get the property surveyed and all the rest of it until you're happy that what you're buying is what you think you're buying. And then the solicitors will do what's called the legal exchange of contracts. And it's at that point when you're legally tied into actually buying the property. Okay, so to answer your question, you are responsible for hiring the solicitor, and it may well be that you can get some recommendations from the local estate agent that you're buying through, and they would usually be appointed on or at the time of you making the offer that's accepted, and it's at the point before the solicitor will issue what's known as the memorandum of agreed sale. Okay, so the memorandum of agreed sale basically confirms the terms that have been agreed between you as the proposed buyer and the seller of the property. Okay, and it basically outlines the name and address of both the buyer and the seller, who the solicitors are that are acting for them, the price that's been agreed, any terms to that price, such as, you know, you've agreed that you're going to complete the purchase by the 31st of January, for example, and whether or not carpets and curtains are included, or whether there's a hot tub in the garden or garden furniture that you're going to buy as part of the deal, that would also be included within the memorandum of agreed sale, and that is issued by the estate agents on behalf of the seller, and that basically just goes out to all four parties so that everybody knows what's been agreed. Okay, but obviously, in order to issue that memorandum, the estate agent will need details of your solicitor that is acting for you in terms of the actual sale. Okay, so if you're looking to find a good solicitor, by all means, you can look online. I'm going to say to you, as a cautionary measure, as I say to everybody who's looking to buy properties at the moment, the worst thing you can do is to buy cheap. When it comes to employing a solicitor, frankly, I say there's a saying, an age-old saying, which is buy cheap, buy twice. When it comes to using a cheap solicitor, you're paying twice, as in once from your pocket and twice with your sanity. Okay, because as some of the other questions were asked earlier on in the webinar today, you'll realize that people are hitting a lot of these hurdles with communication with different solicitors. That largely comes down to the issue of solicitors undercharging for their services. Okay, so it's worthwhile setting yourself a budget of around £1,200 to £1,500 for your conveyance. Okay, that's the sort of thing that you should expect to be paying by working with your solicitor. And the one thing I would do before you get this deal agreed and move forward, Maria, is to get your protect your pocket policy in place, which is a cost indemnity insurance policy, which will ultimately help you recover any of your costs that you're spending out on should the deal fall through for whatever reason. So if the seller pulls out, or there's other issues that you're faced with in terms of the buying process, and you can't then commit to purchase, then the cost indemnity insurance will kick in, and you'll be able to recover the money that you spent out. And the reason I think that's so important is because, depending upon who you talk to, they're saying, 1 in 3 property deals are falling through at the moment. And that's a huge risk if you're faced with costs of up to £2,000 to £3,000 because your sale falls through or your purchase falls through. That's too much of a risk for me to take, if I'm honest. So for less than 150 quid, you can get an indemnity policy in place, and that will underwrite your financial interests so that, God forbid, the deal falls through, you're then protected, and you can sort yourself out as far as that policy is concerned and recoup your costs. Okay, so let me just check to see that I've answered all of those questions for you. The last question is, should you go online or go for a local one? Nowadays, honestly, there are some benefits to employing local solicitors, I'll be honest with you, particularly if there's certain quirks in the local area where a local solicitor may have better knowledge of those particular quirks in that particular area, where their local knowledge can outweigh the knowledge of any other solicitor who may be able to transact the property for you, but they can do it in such a way that they know whether or not the quirk in that particular area is a showstopper, or whether or not it's going to just flag up as an issue, but it's easily resolved because the solicitor's done it a million times because they've sold other properties or bought other properties in that local area. Okay, so hope that helps, Maria. If you want other recommendations of solicitors, please reach out to me, let me know. More than happy to help you there, but wishing the best of luck in this exciting journey of being a first-time buyer and getting the keys to your dream home as soon as possible. All right, good luck. And one other thing I will say, Maria, if you haven't done it already, I would definitely get your hands, shameless plug, on a copy of Home Buyers Secrets. The reason I would suggest you do that is because there is a lot of knowledge and information inside here in this 225-page book that will help and guide you through the process and let you know what's to come and what's to be expected. Also, as a point of getting this book, you'll also get access to a free online video training, which is worth about 500 quid. And that will guide you through a lot more of the concepts that are contained within this book in greater detail than I can without making this about 1,000 pages long. All right. So grab yourself a copy of that. Just go to homebuyerssecrets.co.uk and you can pick up a copy of that book. It is on sale at the moment because it's our launch offering of that particular book and that video training. So it'll guide you through the process in a lot more detail. It'll save you picking up the phone every 5 minutes to speak to the estate agent or the solicitor because you'll just get a much more rounded understanding of what's actually involved in the process and all of the pitfalls that you need to be aware of. Okay, so good luck with that one, Maria, and let us know if we can help you out at all. And today's final question comes in from Randall. Hi there, Randall. Thanks for your question here. Randall says, we are looking to exchange contracts in 2 weeks and we need to sort out a removals firm. We held back because we didn't have the date until now. First of all, where is the best place to go and find a firm? How would we know what size van they would need? Do they pay a visit beforehand? We're moving from a 2-bed terrace, but also have extra big items such as garden furniture. Consider roughly how much would you typically pay for removals? Okay, great question, Randall. Thanks for that. So to help you out on this one, if I were in your shoes, Randall, what I would do is I would do a quick internet search, but I would search for removals companies in and then use the county that you're actually in rather than necessarily the town, because it will open up a wider geographic search. And unless you're in a bigger city like London or Birmingham or Manchester, for example, your geographical search will expand to the point where there will be more listings that will show up. And then I would contact at least 3 of them to get quotes from all 3. So ideally, whenever I'm doing anything like this, I always like to try and get 3 quotes. And the reason for that is so I can compare and contrast rather than just getting 2, which means I've got a choice of either or. The third is usually my yardstick as to whether or not certain things are being included. And what I find with these sorts of things is that the more people you speak to, the more you learn, the more people will flag up certain things that might be something that you hadn't thought about. And as a consequence, you can then take that into your decision-making process as to which is the best way to go. All right. So I would ring around, get 3 quotes, compare what they're telling you. And usually what you'll find is that at least 1 or 2 of them will actually want to come out and look at the property and see what they're actually packing up and moving. Because again, you need to decide, do you want a full service, as in somebody will come in, box everything up for you, and then move it for you, which is going to require a little bit of a lead in? Or do you just want somebody to move all the stuff because you've packed it all up in boxes? And obviously the cost differential between those 2 will vary massively. Okay, they will then be able to estimate very carefully as to what size van will be required based on all of the stuff that you're moving. The reason I'm slightly smiling here, Randall, is because I was in a not too dissimilar situation to you when I moved house, what is it now, 3 moves ago. And I was coming out of a 2-bed property, and I'd spoken to a couple of people about getting removals quotes. And one guy had spoken to me and he just knew exactly what he was talking about. He'd been in the game for many, many years. He said, yeah, I can definitely do the move on that date for you. And he said, yeah, I know exactly what size van you'll need, because it's he'd made an estimation on it being a 2-bed terrace property, is exactly the same as yours. And what they underestimated was that for anybody who's seen any of my earlier videos, you'll know I'm a bit of a reader. And the biggest thing for them to move was actually my book collection, believe it or not. So I packed up a lot of these books, and I'd actually secured some. And here's a great tip for you if you're thinking about moving. A lot of people go to these storage companies to get cardboard boxes and all the rest of it. Whereas, obviously, because I like to protect the environment, it's not because I'm cheap at all. It's not because of that reason. But I went to Tesco's, believe it or not, and I said, to the guys there, do you have any boxes that will be suitable for moving house? And they were actually unloading a load of toys that were on display, and they came in these beautifully thick cardboard boxes that were just perfect for moving house. But they're not perfect if you're filling them full of books, because they weigh an absolute ton. So these poor guys turned up. I think it was a Saturday morning when we'd moved, and these two guys turned up, and I could tell at least one of them had been out on the sherbets the night before. They'd had a few beers. And so they turn up in this van, and I look at it, and I'm like, yeah, they'll get everything in that van. And they start loading up, and they start taking one box after another, after another, after another of these books. And they weighed an absolute ton. And I didn't realize, because I'm, well, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, reasonably fit and strong and able, right? So I was just packing these boxes of books up and then lugging them around. And I'd done most of the work in terms of getting them all ready to go out of the front of the house as soon as possible. And these poor guys, about halfway through the move, you could just tell they were absolutely exhausted. And they were like, I didn't realize you got so many books. And this van was literally on its axles when it was actually moving. So that I think they were surprised at all of that. But yeah, from your point of view, I don't know whether you've got things like that, or whether you mentioned you've got things like your garden furniture to move. But I would imagine a fair-sized box van will get most of this done, perhaps with a tail lift or not, as the removals company will determine. And in terms of costs for you, Randall, I would expect, depending upon where you are in the country, I'm going to say anywhere between sort of 550 to 750 plus VAT is the sort of broad cost range, as I say, depending upon where you are in the country. And also, of course, how far you're moving. If you're moving around the corner, there's a lot less fuel costs involved. If you're moving from one end of the country to the other, that was probably going to be the biggest issue in terms of cost and potentially overnight accommodation for the removals guys if they've got a long distance to move you. So hope that gives you some kind of steer on what you need to do. As I say, I always get 3 quotes on something like this. You can get 4 or 5. It's entirely up to you. But it sounds like you need to crack on with it, because you've only got a couple of weeks before you need to move. And the one thing I will say to you, based on your question, Randall, is to try and get a couple of weeks between exchange and completion. So you say you're going to exchange contracts in 2 weeks. I would see if you can do exchange in 2 weeks and then complete in 2 weeks. That will give you the certainty that everything's going to go ahead in 2 weeks' time. There's not going to be any holdups, because sometimes I have known situations where people have lined up exchange and completion on the same day. And as a consequence, when it comes to the exchange of contracts, that doesn't happen for whatever reason. There's a complication, which means the completion doesn't happen. And as a consequence, all of your removals and things like that were booked all goes out the window, and that causes you a bit of a headache. So definitely look at doing things along those lines, Randall. Hope that helps you out, and wishing you the very best luck moving into your new home. Hope you're very happy there. All right. So guys and girls, thank you for all of your amazing questions. Really appreciate you sending them through. As always, if you've got any questions, concerns, comments, feedback, please feed them through to us. The email address is happytohelp@wiggywam.co.uk. That's happytohelp@wiggywam.co.uk. You can also view past webinars and individual questions from past webinars on our website. If you go to wiggywam.co.uk, that's wiggywam.co.uk, and click on the broadcasts section at the top of the menu bar there, you'll get access to all of the previous editions of these webinars that we've done, if you're finding them useful and helpful, or if you've got any feedback at all. You can feed that back through us through the website. And you can also, there's options for, depending upon who you are, whether you're an estate agent, conveyancer, removals company, surveyor, any of those people, you can have options to join WiggyWam and join the WiggyWam community and deliver your excellent services to our user database there as well. You can also get in contact with us through Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @WiggyWam_UK. That's @WiggyWam_UK. And as always, we welcome any kind of questions, comments, feedback from our WiggyWam community, you amazing guys and girls out there who are supporting the revolution in the property market. And as always, if you would be so kind as to share this with your friends and family, if you want to invite them to a future webinar in the future, we'd love to see you here live, or by all means, you can share this information with them if they're thinking about moving house. As you know, let them know that we're here as a resource that they can tap into and plug into with any of the questions or concerns that they may have. All right. And don't forget, with Christmas just around the corner, get yourself a copy of Home Buyers Secrets, or pass this on to anybody who you know is looking to move home over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. It's an invaluable resource. Even if I do say so myself, I put my heart and soul into this book, and I firmly believe it's there as a guide to really help and support anybody who's looking to move, to help you negotiate a great deal on your next home, to help protect your interests in terms of things going wrong, and they always do when it comes to buying or selling property. Your entire journey is mapped out within this book, and it's really going to help you. So as I say, homebuyerssecrets.co.uk is the website where you can grab a copy of that book, also get access to the online training course as a point of value for getting that book as well. So thanks ever so much indeed for joining us here, guys. I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar very, very soon indeed. And I'm going to say good night and God bless you all, and look forward to seeing you again soon. All right, you take care. Bye-bye.